Oh my gosh, y'all. You know what it's time for? I feel like it's time for the Nerd Log. We have two new guests who I don't believe have been on the Nerd Log before, which is so fantastic. Let's introduce them. Kirk's still here with us. We also have Tanna. Tanna, say hi to the people. Tell them what you do for New Relic.
Hi, I'm Tanna. I work on the Ruby agent team, which is the gem that people install so that they can observe their application.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming out and doing this. And Angela, say hi to the people. Tell them what you do for New Relic.
Hi, I'm the engineering manager in New Relic. I support the Ruby agent and the .NET agent team, but for this next hour, it's all Ruby.
So
Uh,
I feel like sometimes when I do these streams, I'm like the professional fool, where it's like my job to ask the questions that other people are embarrassed to ask. But there's one I will just kind of put out there because I do understand pretty well. Is sometimes we talk about this agent, we talk about the Node agent, or we talk about the Ruby agent. And for people who are completely just aren't using New Relic yet, or are using New Relic for some specific maybe cloud stuff and aren't familiar with this, we kind of have to just take the moment for this that New Relic started out way back in the day as a way solely to monitor Rails apps. And in fact, when I was working way long time ago as a New Relic tech support person, the URL for your dashboard was still rpm.newrelic.com for Rails performance management.
Mhm.
And so, but when we say agent, what it is the agent is a piece of software. And stop me if I screw this up because I did make a TikTok about method prepending. That
very
does not mean I'm smart. But the agent is a way to go in and observe what's happening in your application. The agent also sends that data up to New Relic so that we can display it, store it, chop it up for you to make your pretty dashboards and other views. How good was that? How was that?
Yeah, that's very accurate. Yeah, the agent, it's a gem, the Ruby agent. It's a gem that people just install, and it does a lot of auto instrumentation and will like pick up libraries that it detects are being used. And yeah, it
Yeah.
just gathers all the data it can and what it's configured to do. There's a lot of configuration options to change what it's gathering and stuff.
Yeah,
And
and
then
this is
yeah, it.
actually.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and then yeah, it just sends it up to the New Relic servers.
And this is actually kind of a fundamental thing. Like, when you sort of if you're at the cocktail party talking about New Relic, and I don't want to get too far into this just because I like to give my stuff make my stuff be beginner friendly or people who are kind of on the outside friendly. But these everybody here, we all came to the New Relic live stream. So or you're watching the New Relic update feed on YouTube. So I know but there can be this thing where people think of it as like Splunk or something where like New Relic's a place to store your data and maybe display it in a cool way. We do that. But one of the things that really makes the New Relic experience different from like rolling your own dashboards or just kind of, cracking your knuckles and opening up Prometheus and Grafana is this thing called auto-instrumentation, right? And it is something where it's not that no other competitor does it. I mean, the competitors, especially those who've been in the market for a long time, have their version of it. But it is light years away from, oh, I got to go into my code saying like, oh, here's where we're starting the request. Oh, here's where we're sending the request and tag all that stuff and manually send it up to some kind of data endpoint. The experience is very different from that.
Yeah, for sure. That would be, if someone has a really large application that they're wanting to add New Relic for, if they had to do that, that'd be a pretty big like undertaking for sure. So the auto instrumentation definitely helps with that
mhm.
So yeah,
and
and so I'm sorry, go
makes
ahead.
their like install experience. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I lagging? Oh, I was just saying that, yeah, the auto instrumentation allows it so they don't have to do any manual stuff. And it just allows for a much easier like install experience.
So yeah, I mean I think kind of the classic New Relic experience and something you can still have today with your web apps and with your serverless applications and with your Kubernetes clusters is to have someone say, I'm going to go and install this agent who only maybe even has like partial knowledge of what the code base is and is later able to go and say, hey, this is the exact chunk of code that is causing this problem, right? My kind of classic example is you go and ask for a bunch of users from the database, then you sort those users and you return the germane ones to the requester. And the question of which is slow, the database or the process of processing those database results, right? And the goal of New Relic is to be able to say, hey, it's this one. Now, even if you know that the database request is slow, there could still be a lot of causes for that. If you know your sort process is slow, there could be a lot of causes for that. But to be able to zoom to that level is so key. But Angelo, something's changing about the Ruby agent. We have Ruby agent version 7, if I'm correct. Now we're up to 7.
That's right. It's a big, huge milestone for us. I mean, it was 2 years ago, so we were in 6. Yeah, some minor releases until now, and you were just talking about auto-instrumentation, right? And the big change for 7.0 is that the way that we do auto-instrumentation, right, using monkey patching, right? The strategy that we've used in the past was very dominant on method chaining, the alias method, and we've moved to prepend. And Tanna can tell you more about like the differences, but that was a major change, a major lift for us. At one point in between the milestone, we were counting, oh my God, how many of these gems do we have to actually update? It was like 17 and we were halfway through, so it was a major change for us. Rails adopted it, I think in 5.0, if I'm not mistaken. So at that time, we just updated Rails gem alone. We didn't update for the rest yet, but this 7.0 is basically trying to cover as many, of the gems that we support and moving it so that it's configurable, between method chaining or prepending.
Yeah, so I did some reading, and actually, what's funny is this is like a long-standing sort of issue in the Ruby community as far as having packages do some kind of instrumentation or for any other reason, they're sort of wrapping all of your calls. I can't immediately think of another reason you would wrap all your calls, but they're I'm sure are out there. And I actually was able to find an article about this from KWoo from like 5 years ago from the Ruby Agent Classic team, which is fantastic. And it was talking about how essentially these are both perfectly valid ways to wrap functions, but they don't interact super well.
Yeah. And I think that's something that, later Tanna will definitely share, right? We were expecting that, Sonika, like, it's a good point to bring up, because if another interested party who's using the gem uses method chaining, and then we use prepend, the result is quite predictable. You will get stack level too deep, and it is expected, and we've seen that too coming back in, hence we anticipated it. We wrote a migration guide for it, and I'll just quickly switch to that migration. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, so don't worry. So the migration guide does talk about it. If you go to our doc site, it talks about Ruby Agent 6.x to 7.x migration guide. So in this doc, it will talk about stack level 2D. And if you run into it, definitely stay and watch, the part where Tanna is going to show how to troubleshoot it, because it'll bring you to like help you resolve the issue that you're going to run into.
So it's not that we're stuck with prepend though. If for some reason we want to stick with the chaining, we can, right? We can just configure it.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Because
so it doesn't. Oh, sorry, I was just saying. So it doesn't require the end users to make any changes in their code base and what method they're using. They can just tell the New Relic agent to use the appropriate method for what their code base uses. Am I understanding that correctly?
correct.
Yeah, that's
So
accurate.
I would say,
Yeah.
if you're installing first time, there'll be a default, right? And we want to default to prepend. We want to move forward, right? But what we want to make sure is that we are not forcing our customers, right? They have business applications and their environment. I don't know what it all is, right? That they have the choice and the configuration to be able to enable themselves to return to method chaining if necessary.
Okay, yeah, this is great stuff. Now, and so one other question: do you have enough tabs? I do notice. I got a message the other day. I was opening, I think it was Chrome, it was Firefox, and they said, "Hey, we now have a method for you to group up your tabs. You can group and categorize your tabs." And I looked at that and I thought to myself, that is like someone saying, "Hey, you know those piles of unwashed and washed laundry in your room? What if you put them all into one? We have a solution for that. One big pile." I just thought, wow, wow. Shove your dirty laundry out on the balcony outside your apartment, and that'll
I think when Chrome did this, one of my developers, like kindly just like, "Hey, Angela, I think this will really speak to you."
Much better to use my system, which is 7 open browser windows, vaguely stacked, as my attempt to find which Chrome user I'm supposed to be. So I believe, Tanna, you have some other stuff to show us today.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about kind of how to kind of figure out what gems are conflicting with the agent. So I can go ahead and share my screen now. Talk about that.
Nice. So don't hit stop, Angela. We talked about it. Just
Okay.
Let's start.
All right. I should be sharing my screen now. So first I wanted to point out the options. So these are all of the gems. This is our configuration page in the Ruby agent docs. And there's a lot of configuration options that the agent checks. And we added a whole bunch of new ones with the 7.0 release. And it's all these instrumentation ones. And what these do is it allows people to choose the method of instrumentation that they want installed. And they all default to auto. So the agent will make its best guess. And the agent does have some known conflicts in there. So if there's like air brake, for example, conflicts on a couple of different gems, and also different versions of air brakes either do or don't conflict with like net HTTP, for example. So we actually have checks in the agent to check for those gems that are potentially a conflict, and also their versions if we know of a version change that affects it. And then if it's detected, it will choose chain. Because it's like, okay, we already know about this one. And it's a common one that people run into a lot. So we're just going to go with chain. And that makes it a lot easier for people who are using like a lot of the more common libraries like air brake, for example. And yeah, so we have quite a few options to do. But we've found that it can be kind of difficult for people to know what is conflicting with what. I think so it gives you a stack level 2 deep error. And
now I want to give it a try to explain the stack level 2 deep thing. I think I might have it. The issue is both of these are instructions about where to look for a path for a method, right? Mm-hmm. And if you use both, you're giving a conflicting order of ancestry. Oh, Kirk's getting me. Kirk's got something to say. I want to hear it.
Oh, I was just it gets stuck in a loop basically and keeps descending down into itself until it runs out of stack to descend into that loop, and then everything blows up.
Yeah. So keep seeing those conflicts and looping through like, oh, I should check this. No, I should go check this first. No, I should go check this first. And this is part of the, the whole issue of using a higher order language, right? Like, it's great that it does these things automatically by default, right? But anytime you're trying to use a class-based system in a way that feels nice and automated, nice and clean, you can just go ahead and use a method. There has to be some logic behind the scenes that says, okay, here is where I'm going to look for that inheritance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but yeah, okay. So so now we're analyzing. Okay, why do we have this gem conflict, or we're looking for the conflicting gem that uses a method that's incompatible?
Yeah. So I'm going to use an example that's pretty straightforward from an issue that was filed in our repo after the 7.0 release, and they upgraded to 7.0 and they weren't really sure what gem to add a chain to, and they tried addressable first, but that's actually not a gem that we instrument. And they tried it because at their stack trace, it has addressable here. But the stack trace isn't actually very helpful, even though stack traces usually are. That's how we figure out what the conflict is. But it's because this whole middle of the stack trace is totally cut out. And that's because of passenger. This is their passenger logs. And so if this whole middle is out, you just won't see the interesting part of the stack trace that shows where the air is actually like conflicting. So they got the passenger logs, but those were still, it was multiple stack traces, but they were all missing the middle still. So it was hard to tell. And then actually I realized I shared my browser. Let me share my whole screen real quick, so I can show you the logs. Okay. And so then they got me this stack trace, which they got from like just from their development console, and you can really see here where the conflict
is. We zoom in and enhance a couple of times there. I know we'll lose a few lines, but we gotta embiggen the text size. Give me a command plus. Give me make it a double. Make it a double. Oh yeah, I'm feeling it now. Yes.
More. Okay. Cool.
I think.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. So you can see the stack at the top. The top of the stack trace is the same as what they were seeing. But then you scroll down a little bit and you see it's just these same lines over and over again. And you can see here that it's net HTTP. And it's the chain instrumentation. If it was prepend, it would say prepend here because that's how we've done our file naming. And then the other thing that's happening in this infinite recursion is air brake. And so you can actually pull up the air brake code and look at this like plate, and you can see that they are using prepend here. And this one is older versions of air brake used method chaining, but then in a newer version, a more recent version of air brake, they updated to prepend. So our auto guess was not checking the versions at that time because we didn't know that had happened. So we were like, okay, so it's detecting air brake. We know there's a conflict, so we're gonna use chain, but then there was a new conflict because they've updated that to use prepend instead. So and yeah, so that's the kind of best way to find out what the conflict is look at the stack trace and see the parts that are repeating over and over, and which gem and what the other library is. And I think that's a pretty straightforward example. And then here, even though the agent was because it defaults to auto, and when it's auto, it will choose like it was choosing chain because of the known conflict with air brake. But with this newer version of air brake, we wanted it to install prepend and not chain. But even if it defaults to chain based on the checks that the agent makes, you can explicitly prepend. I want you to install prepend, and it won't check, it'll just install prepend. So you can kind of bypass those checks. And so the agent doesn't have to guess, it just does exactly what you say. And you can see this one. Yeah.
Oh, so by default, it's actually doing it like dynamically, like gem by gem. Oh, see,
yes.
I read the notes, but I did not understand them clearly. Okay,
yes.
So
yeah.
So by default, yeah, it's trying to do it dynamically. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And most of the time it will default to prepend unless it hits one of those known prepend conflicts, which is how we check it in the code. And you can actually see in the logs what type of instrumentation is being installed for each gem. And so for this one, this is what it would say if it was using prepend, and then it would say chain
on this GitHub. Just like yes. One, no, 2 steps. I want 2 steps. Yes, okay. Yes, I feel it. Yes, love it. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
So keep going.
Yeah. So, and this is just one line out of the logs, but this line will be there for all of the gems that have chain and prepend. It logs exactly which instrumentation was actually installed. That way, if there's ever any confusion about what type is being installed, you can just look at the logs and know for sure. So yeah, and then did find that solved their problem, and then they found a new one with rescue. And so looking at that one, looking at that one, they are using method chaining for rescue still, even though they've updated net HTTP to prepend. So I had to, and then they needed to use chain for rescue.
Now this
so
is
yeah, and then that solved
we
their.
had spent the I think it's about $500,000 on getting rights to use the studio master of Fleetwood Mac's The Chain. Just really would have set off this segment a lot better. So I think it's like $500,000 for like small commercial. So next week I'll see if I can make that happen. But
yeah, so that's kind of the general way to kind of like debug what the conflict is and how to know which one to change. And these are the only ones that work. If you put a different gem in here that's not on this list, that means we're not doing method and chaining for that one, and it's not going to do anything. So they
got it. Yeah. So these are the ones where we sort of, and this is kind of getting us back to this thing that I'm trying to explain. Otherwise, again, it's not that New Relic is totally unique in the marketplace for this. This is just sort of, when you look at something like the very laudable like open tracing project, one of the reasons that it's not like open tracing is going to replace our language agents next week is that there's been this level of work, right? This is all stuff that we instrument automatically, that we instrument to an incredibly deep level. And in fact, when there's this kind of conflict, we have a pretty comprehensive list of like, here's where these conflicts are going to come up. And so that's reflects the 10 years of work that we've been doing on the agent, right? That it goes that deep. It's funny. I saw we were dropping support for Ruby 2. So
and 2.1.
Yep.
Kirk, I wonder, do you know? Can you think of? Do you know people who are like they're still on Ruby 2? They're bought in. They're like.
I'm sure there are still people on Ruby 2.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are still applications out there running in the wild that are running on Ruby 1.8.
Yes, there are that are still reporting on a very, very old agent version.
Yep. Yeah. So actually, I have a question that I'm just kind of curious about. So prepend has been available as a feature of Ruby since Ruby 2. Mm-hmm. So what was the inertia that kept us from adopting it until now?
I believe we had some people have issues with chain, like things using prepend. And that's kind of something that's going to be happening more and more as time goes on, because prepend was kind of introduced to kind of replace method chaining, but obviously it hasn't. They definitely both still exist all over the place and oftentimes within the same application. So there's definitely a lot, but it seems that prepend is definitely the longer time has gone on, prepend is getting more popular. So if the agent was always going to be in conflict with all prepend and there was no option around that, that would be a big issue for a lot of customers.
So it was mostly just that when prepend was introduced, even though it was intended as a successor to using method chaining, everybody was still using method chaining. And so it took the passage of time for other people to start adopting prepend before it made it worthwhile for us to put in the substantial effort required to make it an option. Okay. Yeah. I understand now.
I think it helped definitely. I mean, like you say, our prepend came out in 2.0, right? And 2.0 is what, 2030? I don't even know. It's been a long time.
It's been a very long time, yeah.
And then when Rails adopted it in Rails 5, that moved the momentum a little bit more. And then we started seeing more and more gems that we do instrument with alias method starting to use prepend. So we were in conflict, right? Mm-hmm. Seeing the stack level too deep. So it's it's just the trend that's moving towards more prepend. Even like we were just talking about air brake quite often in this session, right? And air brake maintainers themselves, they are migrating to prepend. In fact, some of the issues that we talk about, right? It's already in their plan. They've already closed it. They've already fixed it. They're waiting for a release from their end, and this is like overnight between community members bringing up issues. This is what I love about open source, right? Like someone filed something in our repo and then they found out, oh, okay, this is air brake. They filed it in air brake maintainers pick it up, and then, hey, here's the plan. We've resolved it. Here's the PR for it, It'll probably go in, I think they say 11.02 or 03 on their 11.03 plus. And so they realize it as well. They also want to move towards that direction. So more and more jam maintainers, right, are starting to do that. And we see it.
I see. Yeah, it's such a wild world to see, an ecosystem of this length of life, right? You see, very old Ruby versions running very new gem versions and vice versa, right? And it's a complex story. And I often see this discussion, of course, there's a bit more, how should I say this? The chances that your interlocutor will be a bit more naive come up a bit more in the Node community. The chances that someone's like, well, I've been a web developer for 18 months, so I know how NPM should work. Like I have a simple idea, just a few lines of code that will solve certification issues, right? Or whatever it is. But the questions are similar, that when we have these conflicts or we see these systems that maybe are running in a really torturous way, it's easy to think like, oh, there should be some simple way out of this. But the fact is that computer systems are complex, and we need to build systems that are usable for us. Now, I'm curious, do you feel like, is the experience changed very much for somebody who's just using New Relic for the first time, who's saying, hey, I have this Ruby app and I want to instrument it? Is their experience going to be very different in using the agent?
It shouldn't be very different unless they run into some other gem that they're already using having a conflict.
Yeah.
At that point, they would have a problem, the stack level too deep issue. But other than that, if they're just brand new, getting it set up for the first time, it shouldn't be more difficult for the most part.
I love it. So do we have other stuff that we want to make sure people understand while we're still on the stream? I'm going to check if we haven't had any too in-depth questions in the chat, but do we have stuff that we want to make sure people know before we wrap up the stream for today, or when they go to use the new version of the agent?
I think one other thing to mention is the bundle, the certificate bundle was removed from the agent with 7.0, which we put a supportability metric in the agent a while ago to just so we could see how many people were actually using it. And we defaulted to using system certificates at that time. And it wasn't a huge percentage. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what the percentage was of people actually using the bundled certificates in the agent. But it was not a very big percentage. So this, for most people, will be an invisible change because most people probably already have these certificates installed on the systems that they're running the application on. But for certain people that don't do this, that don't have that set up, this will be something that will make so the agent can connect to the New Relic servers.
Good to know, and good especially if you're one of those edge case people. I believe we've even developed some ability, like if we think something's going to break for people to like reach out. But yeah, supportability metrics are huge, and one of the many ways of like using a well-developed product is often a nicer experience. All right, so I think it's time for us to do our plugs. So Kirk, do you have a SoundCloud album that's going to be coming out?
Actually, Creature Next had a question. If I want to interrupt you, he has a question. He asks, what is the best way to ask for help if you are trying to contribute to the Ruby agent?
Oh, that's a great question. Now, I'm going to feel really on the spot because I'm going to forget the URL for the Explorers Hub. But one of the great resources is the fact that we have a discussion board within our site, which is a great place to come and discuss changes. But I'm curious, Tanna, Angela, do you have other advice if someone wants to make a PR to the agent?
Yeah, so I do recognize the handle Preacher Next. Thank you so much for coming to our repo. We really appreciate it. And I know you've been following PRs as well. What he has been doing is perfect. Just follow an issue in our repo. If you want a discussion, like what Nika was saying, right? Go to discuss.newrelic.com. That's Explorer Hub, right? Submit your issue there as well. But for PRs, typically, just ask it right within the issue itself, and we'll come around to it, and try and respond as best we can on the questions that you have.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you get a PR created and then you have more questions, always just feel to add us and ask more questions, or we get notifications for all the comments. So, but sometimes it does take a couple days to get through everything, especially if the last couple of days we've had so many issues and stuff. Just asking on the PR, and always happy to help as much as we can, for sure.
So if you're not a Rubyist, but you are, first of all, if you're not a Rubyist, how did you watch a 45-minute segment about the Ruby agent? You have the patience of Job. Good work, I guess. But if you skip to the end of this video, I will say, hey, keep an eye out, because we are working on open sourcing all of our agents. And so this is something now that, for a long time was Ruby and Node only, and now is spreading out that Ruby and Python only. Doesn't matter. It's in the past. But this is something you can continue to do, and it's absolutely a really exciting chapter for New Relic as an organization. Obviously been a great part of the Rails experience, or the Ruby experience, for a long time. Okay, so other plugs, and most importantly, FutureStack is coming right up. It is 11 days away, but you can still get 100% free tickets. So I know that there's going to be a link in the Twitch chat for FutureStack. There it is. It happened just as I foretold. Otherwise, Tanna, Angela, do you want to get followed on social media? Do you have a Flickr album of your amateur photography that you'd like people to retweet?
I don't actually have any social media accounts, so.
So what? Wow. You know what the state of technology is when anytime you meet someone who doesn't use social media, you're like, yes, bless you. You have made such a wise choice.
I have a LinkedIn account and Twitter account, but I'm following you, Nika, and I follow Kirk, so I see what's going on.
So then I guess I'll do mine. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Serverless Mom. You can come see me talk at FutureStack. We'll be making some music programming in Ruby with Sam Aaron of the Sonic Pi project. So that'll be fun. What else? Kirk, give me your social stuff.
So I'm W.Y. Haynes, WYHAINES, on Twitch, on Twitter, everywhere. I stream on Twitch most days. And I'm going to be talking at FutureStack as well, a little bit about putting some AI into your code. Ooh. So come check us out.
Neat. I love it. Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Nerd Log. It's been a great one. Do go check out discuss.newrelic.com, or go look on GitHub/newrelic and take a look at our open source stuff. Thank you so much for coming out.